The impact of President Donald Trump's ordered raids to deport undocumented migrants has been swift and far-reaching, even as the immigration sweeps are really just beginning. South Florida is no exception to the effects of the crackdown, so today we look at what it all means for the state and our migrant communities. Let's go on the record.
From WPBF 25, this is On the Record with Todd McDermott.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. Our goal over the next half hour, a deeper understanding of the executive orders on immigration enforcement from the White House and the effects on the state of Florida and our immigrant communities. Joining me today, Professor Luz Marina Garcia from Florida Atlantic University's Political Science Department. Professor, thanks for being here. President Trump's first wave of executive orders included, as promised, a very public effort to find, detain, and deport undocumented migrants. First, on a national scale, what do you believe the impact of these shock and awe raids and deportations are having?
Right. First and foremost, I think what it's going to do is really highlight the issue of tension between the state and federal powers, especially regarding enforcement of immigration policies and the balance between national mandates and state autonomy. So this tension is rooted in the foundational principle of federalism. But what I also see is that there's going to be a lot of strain in terms of how the enforcement is going to happen. And finally, I do see that there will be a prioritizing of border security, but that also means that there's going to be quite a bit of fallout economically, but also attitudinally from a lot of people who depend on the current migration statuses for their livelihood.
Well, let's talk about this initial public spat for a minute between the Trump White House and Colombia regarding accepting the flights of deportees from the U.S. We know the Biden administration was already doing this, but on a much less publicized basis. So is a lot of this action about sending a message to migrants and to the world?
Right. So I think the message that is trying to be sent is one, that a policy agenda that is promised on the campaign trail can happen during presidency. But second, that the Trump administration is conveying a message of strict enforcement and heightened border security, emphasizing the need to prioritize legal immigration and protecting U.S. interests. And so with this, we really do see a lot of policies of suspension of a lot of people's livelihoods and what they've come to call normal. And so this means that this focus is really making a lot of people afraid, first and foremost. But second, it is also making a lot of people very content with the idea of having a more restrictive approach aimed at reducing the number of dangerous people.
And to that end, in Florida, Governor DeSantis and the state legislature immediately jumped on board with new immigration restrictions and enforcement policies, even if the governor and the Republican leadership in Tallahassee didn't see eye to eye in the substance. Is this really about just working the best they can with the new president?
So I think what's important to highlight here is that what is being signed by President Trump, they're all executive orders which are directives from the president that guide federal agencies in carrying out laws, but cannot create new laws or override existing statutes. And while Trump can issue executive orders within the scope of executive power, they must not violate the Constitution or federal law, and they heavily depend on states' discretions on how to cooperate with enforcement. And this leads to varying policies across states. So some states like Florida and Texas take a more aggressive stance in mandating local law enforcement's participation in federal immigration enforcement, while others such as California can pass limited cooperation kinds of laws. And so the legal challenges also play a key role here as states can push back against federal orders that they believe to overstep constitutional boundaries.
Well, as Florida stands as we speak today, is there any leeway for local law enforcement or cities about enforcing the federal agents' mandate for these raids and migrant sweeps?
Right. So there, again, the enforcement can vary strongly. Again, it differs substantially depending on the local and state policies, highlighting the tension between, again, the federal directives and state autonomy. But we do already see these changes. For example, administration has put all localities on alert, and some have responded. For example, the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office applied to ICE's 287G program, which provides training to local law enforcement agencies to assist ICE with executing warrants and processing.
I wonder if you would comment on these ICE raids the White House says can target churches and schools and what the possible implications of that can be.
Right. So sensitive institutions like schools and churches often resist federal enforcement actions, citing ethical and legal responsibilities to protect vulnerable individuals, particularly in immigrant communities. So these institutions have traditionally been exempted from having to comply with such orders, but the new federal orders open the legal risk for supporting undocumented immigrants and allow arrests to be made in churches. And this is obviously controversial, and I think we're likely to see legal challenges by states to delay or modify the implementation of the federal orders in institutions and organizations such as these.
Professor Luz Marina Garcia of FAU, thank you so much for going on the record with us today. We appreciate it.
Of course.
Next, we talk with a member of the Florida House about the plan to enforce the president's new immigration policies here in our state and the at least temporary standoff between the governor and the legislature.
You're watching On the Record on WPBF 25.
Thanks for staying with us as we go on the record on immigration policy with a member of the Florida legislature. We welcome State Representative Toby Overdorf of Palm City, represents people in parts of Martin and St. Lucie counties. Rep. Overdorf, I know you're busy. Thanks for being here. First, give me your initial impressions of the impact of these ICE immigration sweeps and deportations.
Well, I think the United States people spoke when they elected in a massive majority President Donald Trump, and they are fed up with the illegal immigration that happened with the open border policy from President Biden, and they spoke. And so we're now seeing the ramifications of that vote. And I support our law enforcement and ICE agents, and I also support legal immigration. So I think this is something that we're going to see more of as we continue. And obviously, as the illegal immigrants are put back home, then we're going to see a little bit less of that.
What do you make of the sudden measurable drop in student attendance we're reporting in Martin and Okeechobee counties that caused school administrators to try to reassure local families that the campuses are safe?
To be honest with you, I have not seen those reports at this point in time. I'd be more than happy to look into that. But at this point in time, I have not seen those reports and to be able to comment on them.
Let's get to the stalemate last month between Governor DeSantis and the Republican state lawmaker leaders regarding immigration enforcement policy. You're one of 7 state reps who did not cast a vote on the plan passed by the House in response to the governor's immigration plan. They rejected his blueprint. He called theirs weak and threatened to veto. Give us some insight into what's happening in Tallahassee and how this shakes out.
Well, overall, I think that this bill specifically is to support President Trump and his immigration policy. We are here to do that within the state government. I think that we passed an extremely conservative bill within the Florida House that supports law enforcement, that puts well over $500 million towards supporting the immigration issue, and also provides an opportunity now for the state of Florida to be a leader nationally in immigration policy.
Let me ask you this, though. The key difference, the most obvious difference between the plan starts with taking the governor's power in immigration enforcement away, shifting it to the agriculture commissioner. Is that reasonable? Is that just to tweak the governor? Will that be the final version of this?
Well, first of all, we have not taken any law enforcement powers away from the governor. The governor continues to have that. The governor, in no way, shape, or form, as a state executive officer, has the ability to deport any citizen or any non-citizen of the United States. That is only the federal government that is capable of doing that. So again, we have not removed any law enforcement capacity of the governor, and in fact, we've enhanced the law enforcement capacity of our law enforcers out there, our police powers. The only thing that we did do was we allowed for the, under the Secretary of Agricultural's overall purview, he is basically a clearinghouse. So when there is an issue out there, if there is more resources needed in a certain area, he will be the person that will direct those resources. Additionally, he will be monitoring the amount of beds that we have. Again, we put together a $500 million package that makes sure that local government has the money, that our sheriffs have the money, that overall, our DCF, our Department of Corrections, in other words, has the money to be able to house illegal immigrants and have them as they're holding for ICE. You know, in Martin and St. Lucie County over the last several years, we had hundreds of folks that were undocumented, illegal immigrants that were brought into our jail system, arrested for a variety of different things from countries all across the world, brought them in, and unfortunately, ICE did not pick those individuals up. The sheriffs in both Martin and St. Lucie County housed those individuals for whatever the term may be for the infraction that they did. However, ICE never came and picked them up.
We would expect that to change now, Representative Oberdorf. Let me go back
Yes, sir.
Let me go back to the State House and the governor, though. He's threatened a veto. He calls the plan that the House and Senate came up with weak. How does this play out in the end? Is there going to be an agreement quickly as we approach the regular session next month?
There will definitely be an agreement before the next before session starts and next month. I would expect that agreement most likely to happen Monday, and I expect us to be back on the House floor voting on something along those lines. That being said, the bill has not been delivered yet to the governor. We are certainly now in communication with the governor. There was a bit of a hiatus there where there was not that communication, but it is happening now. The governor's office and our various representatives in the Florida House are speaking with the governor, working some details and some issues out. And I expect that this bill is only going to be stronger, it's only going to be better, and will be serving not only the citizens of Florida, but will be a model then for the United States.
Representative, I have about a minute left. We know the migrant community provides a lot of the workers for our economy. Is there any acknowledgement from the state legislature that this could have some kind of chilling effect on the economy of Florida right now?
Look, we heard the same argument when we passed E-Verify several years ago, and that this was going to have a chilling effect. If anyone comes here illegally, we welcome them, we embrace them. This is more of a message to the federal government that we need to fix our immigration system. There is no reason that somebody needs to go through 10, 15, 20 years in order to become a citizen here when they want to become a citizen. This is a mandate to fix that and to therefore allow those people that want to come here legally to go ahead and do that.
All right, and we have made some news because apparently in the coming week, we should see an agreement on this. We want to thank Representative Toby Overdorf for joining us today to go on the record. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the time.
Sir. Thank you. Still ahead, we talk with a local advocate for immigrants, what she's hearing from them, and the advice she's offering now. Welcome back to our discussion on the state of immigration enforcement nationally and here in Florida. I'm joined by Renata Bozzetto, Deputy Director of the Florida Immigrant Coalition. Stated mission, and thanks for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Your stated mission is actually to help people, to strengthen immigration power among our immigrant community. How has any of that changed in the last month as we've seen this change in national immigration enforcement?
Our mission stays the same, Todd, because our mission is to make sure that Florida is a true home for all. And we all, as Floridians, we live in this state, we benefit from the economy, we experience the same challenges that every Floridian experiences. So our mission remains the same. What has changed, though, is how we are responding to the moment. Because the reality is, we have community members who all of a sudden became afraid. There has been so many changes at the national level, and the communities are confused, they are scared. So if anything, we are doubling down on our education so our members feel confident and secured when they are in community, when they are living their everyday lives, right? We have 1 in 5 of us is an immigrant in this state. So our mission remains the same, to work together to ensure that Florida is a true home for all of us.
All right, let's address that though. There's someone out there right now who may be feeling fearful as they never have before. We have reports from the Martin County School District and the Okeechobee County School District. They're seeing a drop in student attendance right now that they are connecting to perhaps some fear among the immigrant community about sending the kids to school because of the potential of an ICE raid of some kind. So what is the message you're telling people that you weren't telling them before? You say it hasn't changed, but obviously there are changes in the situation.
So the reality is we have constitutional rights, but in a moment of crisis, people start questioning them, right? And we are hearing from Americans, American children, that they are afraid of going to school without carrying a passport. I received a call from my neighbor saying that her daughter is carrying a passport because she's afraid of being racial profiled. We did have a change when our president say that no longer we are observing the 14th Amendment of the Constitution and placing at check our right to birthright citizenship, right?
Which a judge has now suspended.
A judge has suspended, but it is a moment of fear. It is a moment of concern. We have Americans who don't know that Puerto Ricans have citizenship. So we have an entire Puerto Rican community in the state that is fearing racial profiling. So it is a moment in which not only our immigrant community is afraid, but also individuals who are questioning the intents and the motives of executive orders and practices that are incoherent with our Constitution and our values as a country.
I want, if we could, to address something that I asked Representative Overdorf in the last segment, and that is possible chilling effect on local economy because of some workers who may be afraid to go to their jobs or to take jobs. He dismissed that, but are you seeing any sign of that so far? Is there any chance of that?
Absolutely. And what's happening is the economy is not only people going to work. The economy is, at this very moment, there is somebody sitting at home afraid to go to church because what is their sacred place of worship is no longer a place protected from an ICE raid. There is somebody afraid of going to the neighborhood market or their traditional bakery because they believe that they could be easily racial profiled and targeted in those spaces.
But if I say to you, in support of the policies, that if you're legally here in the country, you have nothing to worry about, is that enough to reassure people in our immigrant communities that it's safe? And I know that some of these families, they're mixed families. Some may have legal status, some may not.
Mm-hmm. What we need to remember is that immigration policy is incredibly complex. And the administration, the Trump administration, has been very clear that they are not concerned about what they call collateral. And the idea that individuals who are following the law, who are doing their process, and who are waiting for a response from the government are protected, we have clearly gotten a different message from the federal government. So people have all the reasons to be afraid. And we also have a context of rampant disinformation and misinformation, right? As I said, immigration policy is already complex. The system is incredibly complex. And we have bad actors that continue disseminating false information to cause more fear.
I know that you want to give advice to people. What's the most important item that people need to know when it comes to their rights if they are subject to a potential ICE raid?
Most importantly, people need to remember that we all have the right to remain silent. We should never answer a question without having an appropriate advice from an attorney. We have the right to remain silent. Regardless of where we are or who we are, where we were born, this is our constitutional right. The other right that we have is to not be searched without a probable cause. So ICE cannot simply show up in a person's home without a warrant signed by a judge and believe that they can enter without consent and without a warrant and search somebody's house. This is a constitutional right that we need to remind our community that it is a protection that we all have.
Renata Bozzetto from the Florida Immigrant Coalition, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate your insight. On the Record returns in just a moment. Thank you for making this part of your morning today. As always, we encourage you to be part of our discussion each and every Sunday right here at 10 a.m. Until then, you can watch this morning's On the Record and every episode on our website, WPBF.com, and on our free WPBF 25 news app. Matter of Fact with Phil O'Brien was next. From our family to yours, have a wonderful Sunday. We'll see you again next week.